Today we're going to build stacks' brother, queues. They're a bit more complicated behind the scenes than stacks are, so download the starter code below and check out some of the differences before we get started. The first thing you'll notice is that our queue node is now a singly linked list node with a next value instead of a previous node, and only one constructor that takes in the value and the node that it's pointing to. Looking at the queue class, we also see it's very similar to stacks. Instead of the one current node, we only keep track of the head and tail, and that's it. We have our one constructor that sets the head and tail to null. We have our isEmpty that returns head equals null. And what we're going to do now is do our contains, which is going to be almost identical to our stack. So you can really just copy and paste it, change current to head, and then previous to next. That's it. Everything else is identical. Going down to peak, we're going to do that same check, except with if this.head equals null, return null, and then turn back this.head.value instead of this.current. Poll is going to have that same check again, that same setting the value into a variable, that same moving this.head equals this.head.next, but we have to make one final check. If this.head is null, that means we are now at an empty queue, so we need to set this.tail equals null, and then return that value we set aside earlier. So again, just one tiny difference compared to a stack that makes a world of difference. Lastly, going down to push, we're going to create our new node, but set its next to null because it's going at the end of the queue. There's nothing after it. Then we're going to do if this.head equals null, we put both this.head and this.tail to equal new node, and then we're going to return out because we're done. Otherwise, we're going to do this.tail .set next is the new node. That way we connect our current tail to the node we just made, and then do this.tail is now the new node. That way we moved our pointer for tail to the new node, so on our next new node, we create yet a new tail. Again, we kept things simple. If we go to our test, we make sure that we are now using a queue instead of a stack, and then if we run it, we should get a slightly different answer, but one that makes sense for queues instead of stacks. That wasn't too bad. Like I said before, stacks and queues are very similar, so if you've learned one, it's natural to learn the other one right afterwards. You're using all those lessons just in slightly different ways. Coming up next week, I'm going to get into kind of hashing and dictionaries and hash maps and kind of how all that world works, but I'm not going to spend too much time because they all work pretty similarly. So after I finish hash maps, I'm going to go directly into the next major data structure, trees. Like, subscribe, and comment below what you want to see next or topics you'd like to know more about.